Let's take a look at this week's college football playoff rankings brought to you by Goodyear. For the first time since the playoff debuted in 2014, the top 10 unchanged from the previous week. Undefeated Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame maintain the top 3 spots, with one loss. Michigan holding pat at number 4. Hello, everyone. Molly McGrath with David Pollack and Trevor Matich. And Trevor, you and I have talked a lot about complete teams lately. Alabama and Clemson are both complete teams, but how wide is the margin between the two of them?
I think it's extremely narrow because of the progress of true freshman quarterback Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. I think now it's not a matter of talent that will separate these teams if they play in the playoffs. It's a matter of execution. They're that close.
There's no doubt. The gap has been closed. For a while there, we talked about it, and it was Alabama owns their own planet, and everybody else is just kind of renting space somewhere else. And I think it's now both of those teams, because Trevor Lawrence, you got to realize, it's not just that he's made this team, different or better, light years better. They're able to take advantage of the skill that they have on the outside now that was kind of dormant, and it was only used in the quick passing game. They can stretch the field horizontally, they can stretch the field vertically, they can beat you passing, they can beat you running. So, it's kind of like the Drew Brees commercial. The gate is narrow. The difference now is narrow.
Yeah, and that Alabama offense, which is still fantastic. The last 2 games against LSU and Mississippi State, they were scored in the 20s. Now, the defense shut them out, but the offense scored in the 20s when they ran up against defenses that had a bunch of NFL guys on it. This Clemson defense has a bunch of NFL guys on it as well, and I think it'll be a fair fight with that Bama offense, and Tua will have to actually worm his way through a really difficult scenario in order to be able to score a lot of points versus Clemson.
Trevor, you mentioned the word defense. I don't know if Oklahoma quite knows what that is. And Rob Mullins was asked about that and how much that concerns the committee. Why don't we take a listen to what he had to say?
We're very aware that they have one of the most dynamic offenses in the country, a great quarterback, lots of great skill position players. But we're very aware that they're having defensive struggles, that continues to be a deficiency and something that goes into the evaluation.
David, are you surprised that Oklahoma stayed in the top 6 this week?
No, I'm not surprised because, again, what he ended with there, which was the most important thing, is their offense is also, I think, better than anybody's in the country and the hardest to defend anywhere in the country. You're talking about big physical offensive line. You're talking about skill. You're talking about a quarterback that scares the bejesus out of you in the running game. So I think they're still a really good team. Defensively, Trevor, they can't fix their issue. I'm convinced now. I've seen the scheme with 2 different people. They can't cover people out wide. They don't have good enough cornerback play to beat great teams in college football. Cornelius is not setting the world on fire by any stretch, just threw for 500. When you face their corners, they can't play man. They get turned out in zone. It's a struggle right now on the defensive secondary side of the football for Oklahoma, and I don't think that will get fixed.
And, Davey, even with all that, the committee, knowing that, has them at number 6, and they have Ohio State at 10. Same record, similar resume, and yet the Buckeyes are 4 spots behind them. I think that's kind of dangerous for Ohio State because if both Oklahoma and Ohio State win out, and I know there are a lot of other possibilities here, but if that happens, then they'll end up with a similar resume. And the only way for Ohio State to jump over Oklahoma will be to show that they are dominant at the end. They will not just have to survive in advance. They will have to crush their opponents because right now it looks to me like the committee sees both of those teams on tape and they see Oklahoma, bad defenses all, as a more worthy playoff team if the playoffs began today than Ohio State.
And Trev, their records are similar, but one got thumped by 29 to Purdue and one lost at the Horn to Texas on a walk-off kickoff or field goal. So it's not the same either the way they lost to me.
That's a good point. You see a lot of the Big Ten teams kind of beating up on each other. That's going to hurt Ohio State's chances as they're taking on Michigan coming up. And then the Big 12, we have Oklahoma taking on West Virginia. They could see each other again in the championship game. And then standing alone among all of this in the middle of the rankings is Washington State. Is there a legitimate path for them, Trevor?
I think they would need alien abduction for it to work. Because they've got they would need the Big 12 champion to have 2 losses, which could happen if Oklahoma and West Virginia split, or if Texas and Iowa State, who are still alive, somehow win that. If Northwestern won the Big 10, that would help them. The problem with Washington State is not just the teams ahead of them, but a team behind them, and that is Ohio State. If Ohio State wins out, then I think Ohio State will jump over Washington State because that winning out will include a win over number 4 Michigan. And I don't think Washington State has any possible resume-building potential victory left in front of them.
Yeah, and the metrics say on the screen 1.4 chance to make the playoffs. If Alabama loses, they're ahead of them. If Clemson loses, they're ahead of them. If Notre Dame loses, they're ahead of them. Michigan and Ohio State are going to face each other. If Ohio State beats them, they're going to jump them. So, I mean, if Georgia beats Alabama, they're in, and Alabama's probably in. The scenarios aren't good. West Virginia, if they run the rest of the schedule, they're in. If Oklahoma runs the rest of the schedule, they're in. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that has to happen. But I'll say this. If we're going to go back and we're going to watch Washington State, they got hosed in their only loss. They very easily could be an undefeated team. They got hosed by a bad call late in the game. They still lost the game, but they're a team that plays defense too. They've played the best defense I've seen them play in I don't know how long. I'm still keep waiting for them to be like all those stunts and movement to kill them and them to give up those games where they just go bananas on offense against them, but it hasn't happened.
I know it's going to be tough for them, especially with kind of a down year in the Pac-12, but Washington is now ranked, so the Apple Cup will mean something.
And a non-conference schedule that means nothing. Awful. That's a big deal for Washington State. It's a bad non-conference schedule.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
And they're still ahead of Ohio State. Ouch.
Yeah.
I know.
Well,
I think they deserve that. Speaking of strength of schedule, LSU has a strong schedule, but strictly eye test, David, do they deserve to be a top 10 team?
What side of the ball are we talking about? Are we talking about the offense? Because no,
they both matter. They both matter.
No, I mean, it's kind of like Oklahoma, right? I mean, their offense at times is very painful to watch, but you have to have the personnel up front to be physical enough to stop that ground game and the ground and pound and enough QB run to keep you off balance. I don't consider them. I consider them, Trev, in the same ballpark as West Virginia and Washington State and Oklahoma. I feel like all those teams, if they played with each other, would be very competitive games. So I'd kind of put them in that third tier after Clemson and Alabama to have their party, and then Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame. And then I kind of go to that next tier where I'm fine with LSU being there, but also being there with 3 or 4 other teams that I can name.
Yeah, Davey, LSU would need more than just alien abduction to get there because of adding the credit for winning conference championships. In the past, when a team won, they moved up a little. When they lost, they moved down a little. But you didn't see a lot of big jumps in the polls at the end of the season. But now with these rankings, all of a sudden a team is not a conference champion than it is. It gets a whole lot more credit, and LSU cannot be a conference champion. And so their fans could get whiplash seeing people jump over them, even if they went out.
But something that's important is them being at 7. If Alabama was to stumble, Alabama stumbles to the number 4 team in the country or number 3 team in the country, Georgia, wherever they rank Georgia, and then LSU's sitting at 7. Their resume obviously is huge because they beat that team that's at 7 by 29 points. So it's a big deal either way for resumes and building and future and who gets in, who gets out.
Trev, your gut reaction, the top 4 as it stands, do you see that being the group that makes the playoff?
I do, because I think Notre Dame wins out, and I think Michigan will pay off all that faith in Jim Harbaugh. They will beat Ohio State, and they will win out.
Okay. Negative.
There's
We
a
do this every
14%
year.
chance.
We do this every year, and we get down to the end of the season, and we kind of just say it's going to happen, it's going to be like this, but no. We will have some form of drama. We always do, and for God's sakes, I hope so for our show's purposes, because I don't want to go up there again like last night and go 1 through 10, all 1. It's just the same. It's exactly the same. We're going to say the same thing. We're going to talk about the same topics. So no, I think we'll see something. Whether Notre Dame, Syracuse, Michigan, we'll see something.
We need a little chaos to keep things interesting. All right, don't forget to vote for which team you think will win the championship by using the hashtag #OneFinalTeam. That is with Dr. Pepper. Now let's take a look. If the season ended today, this is what the New Year's 6 matchups would look like. I'm liking that UCF would be taking on another SEC school in LSU. They did that last year. Which one stands out to you, Trev?
To me, it's the Sugar Bowl. I think Georgia would rather face Baker Mayfield with last year's defense than Kyler Murray with this year's defense.
I don't think it would be much different either. I think that'd be a high-scoring affair. Oklahoma ain't stopping Georgia. Georgia ain't stopping Oklahoma. Get your popcorn. That would be a very, very, very fun game to watch.
All right, we'll see what happens. UCF has a big opportunity this weekend taking on Cincy. We're going to talk about that one coming up next. And can Syracuse pull off the upset against Notre Dame? ExxonMobil's unexpected energy has us looking at number 12, Syracuse. The Orange off to their best start since 2001 and have their second shot at a top 3 opponent this season. And you remember last year, they handed number 2 Clemson its only loss of the season. So they have played spoiler before. Now that brings us to too high or too low as Notre Dame opens up as an 11-point favorite over Syracuse. David, is the spread too high or too low?
I say too high. Syracuse is a team that is fun to watch. They got a lot of points. And remember, Ian Book is dinged up. I tell you what, you watch Syracuse tape on defense, too. They got some athletes coming off the edge that can get some shots in and hit them. And Eric Dungey and company can score. So I would say too high, Trev.
Davey, I would say too low because I think in the beginning that defensive line of Syracuse will make a lot of noise, but I think the secondary is not up to covering those great pass catchers at wide receiver and tight end, and I think Ian Book will run away with this thing.
If Ian Book didn't play, would you change your mind?
Yes, then I would agree with you.
Okay.
That would be a game changer for them. West Virginia, a 5-point favorite in Stillwater. Trev, is that too high or too low?
That seems too low to me. That's weird. I think either West Virginia runs away with this thing or they lose it because this Oklahoma State team can get really hot, but if they're not really hot, they're fairly cold.
So things getting weird. I agree. Trev, you're a big favorites guy, huh? Take the favorites. I mean, I think that what West Virginia's showing us, you can trust their defense a little bit more. I don't think Cornelius and company will go off like last week. I'll take West Virginia. I believe in the Mountaineers.
All right.
You said with a question
Stillwater,
mark.
really tough place to play, though.
It is, Molly. It totally is, yeah.
Okay, moving on. Clemson, a 28-point favorite over Duke. Trev, what do you think of this one?
I think that's a little high, but this game interests me because of all coaches, David Cutcliffe of Duke will know how to scheme problems for a true freshman quarterback, and I'm interested to see how Trevor Lawrence handles it.
Well, not the true freshman. How about that guy, Daniel Jones, playing QB? That dude is a beast. He's healthy again, 6'5", really good in the pocket. I think the weakness of Clemson's defense is obviously not the defensive line. I think they can make some plays in the passing game. I think that's too high. I think it'll be a 20-point game.
How about a ranked non-Power 5 matchup? We have UCF as a 7-point favorite over Cincy. David, you're going to be there for game day. Too high or too low, bud?
Game day coming to town, all the excitement, all the enthusiasm. I'll tell you what, Cincinnati can run the daggum rock. They're physical. I like what they bring to the table, but I just think too much firepower, too much excitement. Kirk Herbstreit in town. I mean, everybody's going to be jacked up. Like, it's just no chance. Come on.
Oh, boy.
Well, since you'll hit him in the mouth, but there's too many players on that UCF offense that can turn a 4-yard gain into an 80-yard touchdown.
All right, Trevor, what about some midweek action? We have a 6-4 Ohio, a 3-point favorite over a 9-1 Buffalo. What's going on with Vegas here?
No, I think Buffalo wins this game going away. I think the bad matchup for Ohio is that their secondary won't be up to the explosive plays that the Buffalo offense can put on it. Buffalo leads the MAC in plays of 70 yards and more. Ohio can't match up with that.
Well, that's the reason why right there. Tyree Jackson, 6'7", 250-pound quarterback that's nimble. Anthony Johnson, by the way, is an NFL baller at the next level. Buffalo's got some daggum skill. I mean, they've got some players. So I think you can take that to the bank. You can count on Buffalo and their big quarterback to make big plays.
You never know what's going to happen with some action craziness, though. Just going to say that game's tonight at 7 Eastern on ESPN2. Trev and I are going to be there in studio for halftime of that one.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, it should be. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about...
But y'all have a blast.
Let's get to bump, all right? We're going to talk about some quarterbacks with Mel Kiper Jr., who he likes for the NFL draft. Some of the guys may surprise you a little bit. And Saturday, we've got 2 big Week 12 games for you on ABC. It's the Big 12 at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 9 West Virginia against Oklahoma State. And still 9 of the top 10 names on Mel Kiper Jr.'s big board are on the defensive side of the ball, led by defensive end Nick Bosa and Oregon quarterback Justin Herbert, the top offensive player on the board at number 4. That is if he decides to leave Eugene. So let's welcome in the man behind the big board, Mel Kiper. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to start with number 1, Nick Bosa, because he's staying put at number 1 despite his injury. And then we see Ed Oliver, who's moving from 2 down to 7 after missing the last 3 games with an injury. So why is that?
Well, if you look at it, first of all, Bosa, Molly, he's already done everything you can do at the collegiate level when he's on the field. Now, he's had the ACL as a senior in high school, now the core muscle surgery. So there's 2 injuries over a pick overall, and he's in the clubhouse right now getting ready. So his next injury, hopefully it never happens, will be once he's in the NFL. Didn't want to risk having another injury in college. For Ed Oliver, it's a different ballgame. He's obviously had the minor injury, but he doesn't have the sack numbers that Aaron Donald did. And I think you look at only about 270 to 275, not 290, 295. So I think Ed Oliver's still in the top 10, but right now Quinnen Williams from Alabama, who's had a dominant year, he's finishing plays. He's not getting hurries. He's getting the sacks, tackles for loss. He's been disruptive. He's killing double teams. He's been, to me, the best defensive lineman right now in all of college football this season.
I think the best defensive player in all of college football. He's been that kind of dominant. When you have a guy like Quinnen Williams, just out of curiosity, that comes kind of out of nowhere for everybody at a school like Alabama, what is the process? Now what are you going to start doing with him and finding ways to catch up on everything he's done throughout his career?
Well, what'd you do, Dave? With him, I went back even last year. You noticed him when he was a redshirt freshman. Deron Payne, you had there doing his job. You thought this year Raekwon Davis would be the dominant guy up front for Alabama. But then all of a sudden, Quinnen Williams was taking over games. And I don't like to go crazy on a third-year sophomore the first month. I want to wait until you get into late October, early to mid-November to say, okay, now I'll put him on the big board. Because obviously Nick Saban and a lot of they don't want to encourage these underclassmen. But when you're playing as well as he has been all year, and you're consistently dominant, you're coming off 2 tremendous performances, you got to put him in there. And I moved him up from mid-first round to the second pick overall, or second spot, I should say, on the big board, because he has been not only productive in terms of collegiately, but projecting to the NFL as a high-profile player like an Aaron Donald. The more of a comparison to Aaron Donald is Williams, rather than saying Ed Oliver, which a lot of people were, I thought, inaccurately, comparing to Aaron Donald back in August.
Mel, this quarterback class not as deep as it was last year. What have you seen from Justin Herbert that makes you think that he's the #1 quarterback in the draft?
Awesome talent, Molly. The kid's got tremendous skill set in terms of the size, the arm, the mobility, the smarts, everything you want. Now, I'd like to see him go back. I haven't seen the consistency yet from game to game. I think when you look at a guy like Justin Herbert, some subtleties you see with, say, Daniel Jones from Duke, you don't necessarily always see with Herbert. Maneuvering in the pocket, slipping and sliding there, holds the ball a little too long at times. Accuracy is a little inconsistent, but hey, you roll the dice on a kid with his upside if he does come out, and you're the New York Giants, say, picking in the top 5. Justin Herbert, I do believe if he comes out, will be the first quarterback taken, but I would like to see him go back to Oregon like Andrew Luck did go back. Eli, Peyton Manning all went back when they could have come out. I think he could benefit from another year in that Oregon offense.
He's going to go back too. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Mel, I think that Washington State quarterback Gardner Minshew is a guy that should be in the conversation in that first round. I think I'm a lot higher on him than other people are. I see him with the accuracy. I see him with the mindset that would translate well to the NFL, and yet he's not on the big board. What do you see in Gardner Minshew?
I like the kid. In fact, I am the 3 in terms of the MVP of college football this past week on ESPN.com. He's in my group of top 10 quarterbacks when you combine the underclassmen with the seniors. He's another guy, Trev. At East Carolina, you're seeing a different quarterback at Washington State. So give him a lot of credit. Give, obviously, Mike Leach and that offense and the players around him in the system a lot of credit for that. He's got a little Baker Mayfield in him. You see a guy, he just has an it factor about him, as Will Grier does as well at West Virginia. 2 guys that just, when you watch them, you're impressed with how they go about their business. I think Grier and Minshew fall into that category of just, you got to like watching them play. They do the job the right way, and they've been consistent from game 1 up until now.
Mel, looking at your list, I was really surprised that there are no Clemson D linemen in the top 10. Cleveland Ferrell right outside of the top 20. Well, he's actually at 19. So why is that? Why did they fall a little bit?
Not finishing, Molly, as much. And this is collegiate football where you're looking at guards and centers, and tackles aren't necessarily going to be in the NFL. I look at Farrell as a guy that I think has a chance to even kick inside as well as be an outside presence. But I think you look at Lawrence, and even some games with Lawrence and Christian Wilkins when there was like a Syracuse game. You're talking about Syracuse driving, and it's a 3rd and 4. They're not on the field. So I think pass rushers that finish and get the sacks, something that I think all those guys this year haven't done as well as you maybe had hoped. But they're all right there. Wilkins is right now at 27. If I had a 27, I cut it off at 25, and Farrell and Lawrence are right in there. But there's a host. There's right now 16, get this, guys, 16 defensive linemen with a chance to be in the first round discussion.
That's crazy. So much talent there at Clemson, and they have a big challenge ahead of them. They're taking on Duke's quarterback Daniel Jones this weekend. Yep. Another one of the guys on your big board. Thank you for your time, Mel.
Thanks,
As
Molly.
we move on to an all-timer from Mike Leach. If you know the guy, you know that you can't ask him a hypothetical question because he's going to take it way too seriously. And someone asked him about a hypothetical brawl among Pac-12 coaches. Take a listen.
Well, based on their players, Kyle would be. I mean, those guys hit you as hard as anybody in the conference. Plus, he's in good shape. Okay, so let's see. We got Kevin. Then Herm Edwards is in great shape. Let me think, am I missing anybody? And I don't really care if they get ticked off. Because actually, privately, I think I would, but we're going to be more modest than that. I'm going to say Kyle or Herm for sure.
Unbelievable. I mean, okay, well, let's talk about who you think should win in a Pac-12 draw. David?
Kyle Whittingham. This isn't debatable. I mean, not only will his players hit you, dude's in shape. And listen, if you're going to put him up against Herm, too, youth is on his side. He's a lot
That's
younger
true.
than Herm. Herm, maybe 20 years ago, I would say that. But give me Kyle Whittingham all day long.
What about you, Trev?
I agree with that with Kyle. I played against him in college, and my head still hurts. But I would say David Shaw of Stanford because he would be the guy that would study you. He would know what move to make, and he'd slide in and knock you out before you knew it.
All right, that's it from us. We'll see you tomorrow.